We have had 2 races now this season already with no safety cars, virtual safety cars, yellow flags, DNFs or any major crashes, which is absolutely insane if you think about it. Just to put this into perspective, since Formula One's inception in 1950, there have been 1,086 races. Now guess how many of those races have not had a single DNF? Maybe half of that, even maybe down to 200? The answer is just 14. What's even crazier is that between 1961 and 2005, there were 44 years of Formula One we saw with at least one DNF at every single race. And what's even madder is the race that broke this streak was the 2005 United States Grand Prix at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, one of the most famous Formula One races in history, as only 6 of the 20 cars actually started this race, and yet all of them seem to manage to finish. This just shows how reliable Formula One cars have become, and even just over 1 year into a new major regulation change, we are seeing some of the best reliability in Formula One's history. So here is a list of the 14 races in F1 history that have had 0 DNFs. Now look how many there are in the last 3 years. We've had the current point system that they use in Formula 1 since 2010, where points are only awarded to the top 10 drivers. But as more drivers are finishing F1 races more than ever, is it time we awarded points to more places in F1? The 2 main ways that an F1 driver will DNF from a race is either due to a crash or driver error, or due to the car's reliability. You'd think with the amount of sensors, electronics, computers that are built into these Formula One cars, they would potentially be less reliable. Engineers can now monitor the whole car from the pit wall, so it's easy to identify any problems and change something. It's hard to say if Formula One has had more crashes in recent years, but I'd probably say as an assumption it's fairly consistent season to season, maybe except in 2021 between 2 certain drivers. You can see from the last 12 years since the point system was introduced, there is a general downwards trend of total DNFs, but one thing to take into account is we do have a lot more races now than we used to. So what we can do is we can plot the total DNFs per race against the years, and in this case we still see a very similar trend. DNFs in Formula 1 since the new point system was introduced are trending downwards, but more cars are finishing races than ever. So why would we consider using a new point system in Formula 1? Only the top 10 drivers in the race get points, and these points are extremely heavily weighted towards the top 3 or 4 drivers. With only the top 10 getting points, this means half the drivers taking place in the Grand Prix will leave Sunday with nothing to show for it. And with teams like Red Bull becoming extremely dominant, and also with teams like Mercedes, Ferrari, and now Aston Martin taking up most of those front places, if these front 4 teams don't have any issues during the race, they'll typically lock out the top 8 point positions. This leaves just 3 points for P9 and P10 available for the final 6 teams, so it makes it extremely difficult for those teams to get points. So I asked my YouTube community what they think. Half of you said that we should keep it as the top 10 finishers only. 36% said we should increase it to P15, and the remaining 12% said increase points all the way down to P20. Now I think the best solution for this would be to have points from P1 down to P15. I know some people will argue that all the points in Formula 1 are meant to be hard to achieve and you shouldn't just be giving out points for taking part, but I would say that the Grand Prix would be a lot more entertaining and representative if we had a greater spread of points. Now this P1 to P15 is what is used in MotoGP, and I think this would be the ideal spread of points. I'd still give the fastest lap to the top 10 only, as I think this will make things more interesting from a strategy point of view, as back markers wouldn't just be able to pit to take this point off their rivals. There are other point systems that could be used potentially, like IndyCar. This gives points to all drivers, and even the bottom 9 positions all get 5 points for finishing the race, with the most laps led in the Grand Prix getting an additional 2 points. Now personally, I don't think this would work great in Formula 1. I don't think you should just be giving out points for finishing. Now I've collated all the results this season so far. and converted the original point system into this new point system to see how the championship standings would look in this case. So as you can see, the original has a lot of 0 points across the grid and just a few points awarded to the bottom 10 drivers. These are normally just 1 or 2 points. So P12 of Nico Hülkenberg in the championship down to Logan Sargent is spread by just 6 points. Updating this point system, the championship looks different. Everyone from Max Verstappen all the way down to Logan Sargent get points. So let's compare this championship to the original. Surprisingly, the top 10 actually don't change. No surprise, Yuki Tsunoda gains the most from this, gaining 5 positions in the championship. We know he's come close to points at almost all races this season, so he's heavily rewarded for his consistent driving, where currently in the championships, it doesn't look like he's performing that great. Lando Norris drops a position, Kevin Magnussen gains his position, and Nico Hülkenberg drops 5 positions. Hülkenberg is a driver who I would say is having a fairly decent season, but that Haas definitely isn't the best. But that P7 in Australia really helps him out using the current point system, where that is his only points finish. K-Mag on the other hand has been a bit more consistent, finishing the top 10 twice, had a P11 and 2 P13s, so overtakes his teammate. Another thing to note is obviously Max Verstappen is still dominating. With most championships, obviously if you win the majority of the races, no matter the point system, you're going to dominate. But if we look at the rest of the championship from Perez down to Hamilton and Russell, the points are much closer. Just 14 points between Perez and Alonso, and just 11 between Alonso and Hamilton. Also, just mainly out of interest, I don't think we should use this point system, but I was interested to see how the championship would look if we gave points from P1 all the way down to P20. Now this point system is very different to the original, as it doesn't heavily weight the top drivers. P1 gets 20, P2 gets 19, and this decreases by a point all the way down to P20, who gets a point, and if you retire the race, you get 0 points. For all of these, I have kept the sprint points exactly the same, as sprint points are awarded this way and no one seems to kick up much of a fuss about it, going from 8 points for P1, 7 for P2 and so on. But this would be the optimum way to represent the grid in terms of performance if you just wanted to look at the driver's overall finishing position across the season. I think drivers winning the race should be awarded a bigger points advantage over say P2 and P3, like we do see in the original point system, so I don't think this would be the best system. We do see a little bit more change than the original. George Russell loses a position, Carlos Sainz moves up a place, Lance Stroll and Ocon move down 2, and Gasly gains 2 positions. Norris and Hülkenberg lose positions, but Zhou Guanyu and Yuki Tsunoda, who I think are both having great seasons in the midfield, do move up the championship. So the main reason I would like to see this is I think it has a better representation of performance across a season, while still rewarding drivers towards the front of the field with a lot more points than the midfield. If we go back to 2021 with Russell and Latifi at Williams, their points at the end of the season weren't that different just because it was so difficult to score points in that Williams. Russell was consistently outperforming that car and getting close to the points in most races. It wouldn't rely in a good drive from George most weekends to get points. The thing it would come down to is how many of the top 6 or 7 teams didn't have a DNF in the race. It's like the Williams at Spa that year. They managed to somehow get extremely good performance out of that car in the wet in qualifying, and due to the car being stuck behind the safety car, they ended up gaining a lot of positions in the championship due to those points. It was extremely impressive from Williams and especially Russell to get that car into P2, a place it should never have gotten. But when you look at the points at the end of the season and the prize money these teams are fighting for, should one event like that heavily weight the rest of the season in terms of performance, I don't think that's necessarily the best way to give out points. The whole point is you need to develop a car that can win the championship. They shouldn't just be giving out points to back markers for no reason. But one thing we have seen this season already in 2023 is all 10 teams have had points this season. So if Williams next weekend get a point in Canada, will this be a huge deal like it was maybe a few seasons ago? Probably not. Now, I'd much rather see a representative spread of points awarded to all the drivers, but more heavily weighted to the podium positions. So I think the reduced amount of DNFs this season warrant F1 to reconsider if they should use this new point system. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. What do you think is the best current point system for Formula 1 at the moment? And thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.